Welcome back. Episode 3 of Making Insight. I'm your host, Clayton, and today I'm joined by a good friend of mine, David Richards. David is an extremely creative individual who is a co-founder of Poker with Purpose. And before we discover what ultimately led to Poker with Purpose, David gives me a good introduction to his background and upbringing. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it. Making Insight, episode 3. I got David Richards here. He is the one of the two personalities behind Poker with Purpose. That is how I came to know you and developed a friendship with you. First off, thank you for being here. I am just beginning this podcast and entirely grateful for you being open to giving up space to be here and share a little bit about you and the creative work that you're building for others with Poker with Purpose.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And, kudos to you for starting your own passion project and creating space for people to share what they're up to, and for you to put all this work in and be able to share your own truth and, live a life that is supporting others and being a source of connection for people who are up to big things. So that's like something to be really proud of. And thank you for having me.
Amen. Housh. You're welcome, David. I do have to give a shout out to Obsidian, who I actually just spoke with on the mic 2 days ago. And for a while, I was telling her that this was something that I wanted to get started, and she held me accountable. She's like, you got to schedule 5 guests, and you both were one of the first 5. And, I was a little nervous at first, but you both said yes, and here we are, and I'm ready to get started.
Beautiful.
So let's do it. I would like to know a little bit about your background leading up to David Richards today, Poker with Purpose, poker player. Where'd you grow up? Where are you from? And
yeah, so I'm 40. Born 1984 in Syracuse, New York. Born into a middle-class suburban family. Went to high school in Baldwinsville, New York. A lot of my life growing up was centered around success, wanting to be successful. I started swimming competitively at 7, and that was something that once I picked up, I didn't put it down. I can't say that I fully enjoyed it. Wasn't really sure what else I would be doing, but it did give me a sense of purpose, and it gave me a sense of direction. And so from 7 all the way up to the end of high school and through college, I ended up being Division I swimmer. And that taught me a lot of things, gave me a lot of structure in my life. And a lot of my days growing up and going through high school was, working hard at swimming and working hard in school, getting good grades. And, my parents were very success driven. So they wanted me to grow up and be successful, which to them was get a good job, go to a good college, and contribute to society. And, obviously success is a little bit different to me nowadays than it was back then. Back then it was really driven from the outside, and everybody back then was going to college. Everybody then was either doing sports or whatever. And I even had the perception that people who didn't graduate high school and go to college and get a good job after were losers. Like, to me, it was unfathomable that people would not graduate high school and go to college. Like, it just wasn't in my mindset. And, that was kind of the way that my parents were driving me. So I did my best, get good grades. I think I was 7th out of like 350 in my high school class. Took a lot of AP courses. I didn't have like the best grades, but I took a ton of like advanced classes, so it bumped me up a lot. And then I had my sights set on some really big brand name private schools. Duke and Notre Dame in particular, wanted to be on the swim team there and have a brand name college to hang on my wall. I ended up not getting into them and ended up going to the University of Buffalo. And that was a really kind of soul crushing experience for me, because I just thought I was like, who would not want me? Like, I work hard, I get good grades, I swim hard. Like, I don't have the fastest times, I don't get the best grades, but like, I'm a hard ass worker. And so,
did you get rejected from both those schools because of swimming, or academically were you able to get in, or did you want a combination of both?
It was probably a little bit of combination of everything. I wasn't doing a lot of service back then. I mean, I was in maybe like the honor society or something, but a lot of those colleges look for like, what are you doing outside of academics and athletics? They want you to be well-rounded. So I was a little bit short on the service side. Swimming, I was fast, but not that fast. I probably would have been like just off the roster for those.
Did you go ahead, keep going.
And then academically, I wasn't a genius, but I like worked hard to study and everything like that. So it was probably a little combination of all of them, and nothing personal to me. It just ended up not being my path.
Yeah. Was University of Buffalo like the other two?
Yes.
They were. Did you have a career path in mind prior to going to college?
No,
Pretty open.
I didn't even. I knew everything up until I graduated high school. I knew like what my parents taught me, which was swim, work hard, get good grades, go to college, and everything after that is get a good job and figure it out after. But I didn't know anything outside of the realm of high school. So when I got to Buffalo, the whole first of all, I was a bit crushed because I didn't get in where I wanted to get in, and I thought that I was going to get in because I was told if you work hard, things will work out for you. And then all of a sudden, it didn't work out for me. So that was pretty soul crushing. And then when I got to Buffalo, the experience I had was just being a small fish in a big pond.
Were you there alone, pretty much?
Yeah, I knew some guys that would swim in between Buffalo and Syracuse and Albany. So I knew some of the swimmers that were there. They were on the team as well. But in general, none of my close friends went there. Didn't have any family that went there. I mean, my parents were close. They would drive up to see me and everything like that. But when I got there, I just remember it being very small fish, big pond. Like, oh my God, like, what do I do now? Like, it just,
And so you graduated from University of Buffalo, correct?
yes. Well, no, I didn't.
You did.
Did not. After my first year, I was really unhappy. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was going. I had a regular like I did like a double major like psychology and pre-med, but I just wasn't like in love with it, and I didn't know where I was going after it. It felt like those are things I was interested in, but I didn't have like a career path mapped out. So after my first year, I was just like, what the hell am I doing? Like it was just one of the first big like spiritual awakening moments because I got confronted with like the who am I? Like without college, without good grades, without your parents telling you which direction to head or anything. It's like, who am I and what am I really interested in and where am I heading? So instead of at that time, I didn't really know like, and I didn't have any guidance in terms of, hey, why don't you take 6 months, figure out what you like, figure out what you don't like, figure out where you want to go. Like, hey, it's okay to take some time to figure out who you are and where you want to go and what you want to be up to. So I freaked out and I'm like, okay, well, this isn't working and I better get my shit together because if I don't, then I'm really going to be in trouble. I'll be 25 and totally lost. And oh my God, like what, so I had a couple friends that went to West Point and the idea of that, just like Princeton Review, #1 school, swimming Division I, free education, and then just getting a job after military officer, which my mom was and my dad were thrilled with. And, just having something to hang my hat on that kind of allowed me to sweep those other conversations under the carpet was like, okay, yeah, sign me up. And so I did the whole application. It's a very rigorous application process. You got to do interviews and physical fitness tests and essays and all this stuff, and ended up getting in. And I remember the day I arrived, the day you get there's our day, reception day. And you go in this auditorium and you're sitting with your parents and they're like, welcome to West Point. And they do this whole speech, whatever, like, 30-minute speech or something like that. And then they go, I have 30 seconds to say goodbye. And you're just like, shit. Okay. So you turn around, you hug them or whatever. And then all the cadets walk off and you go behind this curtain. And on the other side of the curtain, they're like, you belong to us now. Get on the bus right now. And they're just swearing at you and they're just like bringing the heat. And you're just like, oh shit. Okay. And then I remember like very distinctly at one point throughout the day, they take you all these stations, get you your uniforms and all that stuff, get you set up, get your room together and everything. And I remember at one point you go and you're in the academic building and they put your contract in front of you. That's basically like you're signing up for 4 years at West Point and then you're signing up for 5 years after. And this is a contract you sign. And I remember sitting there going, holy shit, like 9 years. That's great. Like, I just remember like there was no turning back for me because I was already like the river was flowing in this direction. And I, at that point, wasn't.
It's like, what else? What else did you have in your mind besides that? It's like no other choice.
Exactly. So I just remember signing that. And I remember it being like, oh shit, like I don't really know what I'm getting into. And so what it ended up being, looking back on it, was this fear of not knowing who I was or where I was going. And the need to have it figured out all right then was like driving me down that road. And eventually I was setting myself up for like a big karmic lesson, which is basically, if you're not aligned with, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in which direction you're heading, if all those pieces are not heading in the same direction and on the same page, it's going to come back to bite you.
The universe will continue to teach you lessons over and over until you start to realize.
Yeah. Well, what ended up happening was I just ended up being like very unhappy. I mean, West Point was cool. It's nostalgic. It's something I look back on and be like, wow, I can't believe I did that. And you got, you're in it with all the other guys that are there. You got military training in the summer. I went to Europe, traveled on their dime. It was a really cool experience. But when I got to the Army, especially, that's when it really confronted me, because I was no longer like at West Point. Now I have like responsibility, and I'm responsible for these soldiers. I'm no longer like, when you're at West Point, you're the student. And so there's just a perception of like, okay, I don't have to be fully responsible. And then I got to the Army, and it's like, you're in charge now, you're making decisions. And I'm like, but I don't know who the fuck I am. How am I going to make decisions for these people, And so when I got to the Army, that's when it really hit me. When I started the units I was in and the stuff I was doing, I was like totally not interested in. And that was just like super, super unhappiness hit me.
So you did 4 full years in West Point, correct? And then you went into the Army, correct?
Yeah.
And where were you first stationed?
First duty station. So the way they do it at West Point is you get to, based on how well you do, militarily, academically, physically, because you get your overall rank at West Point is based on those 3 things. Your academic grade is like 60%, your physical grade is like 15%, and your military grade is like 25%. And so I was like 140th in the class of 1,000. They just go down the list, and you pick what branch you want to be in, and then you pick what duty station you want to go to. And so I happened to be fortunate enough to choose. So I chose to go to Hawaii. And I was, at that time, everybody was deploying. Like every unit everywhere was deploying. I graduated 2008. So we were like right in the middle of war. And I did not want to go to war at all. That was like, I'm unhappy here. Like, imagine how unhappy I'd be living in a tent in the desert in Iraq, Afghanistan. So I happened to get to a unit that had just come back from Korea, and they had to get resituated. So I got to spend all 3 years on the island of Oahu. I didn't deploy at all. So I spent 3 years there. I was married. I was dating someone while I was at West Point, and then we got married right after I graduated, like literally the month that you graduate, because you can't be married at West Point. So as soon as I graduated, you get married, and then when you're married, you get some certain benefits. You get paid more and stuff like that. So that was drawing that. And yeah, so we lived in Hawaii for 3 years, did a bunch of triathlons, I did Ironman, all that stuff.
Did you do the full Ironman? And how helpful was being a collegiate swimmer?
Pretty helpful.
A side note, my neighbor's been asking me to sign up for a full next summer. I'm considering it. I've only done 2/3 of a half. I did the swim and the run, but I'm intrigued. I'd like to do it.
What intrigues you about it?
For me, it's doing hard things, getting out of the comfort zone. I have full faith that I can physically do it. I think probably the difference between a half and a full is all mental and maybe just a little additional training. But I mean, when I did a friend of mine, and I did the swim, he did the bike, then I did the run. I was just in shape when I did it. I did not do a lot of training for the swim. The furthest run I did was maybe 2 miles prior to that, and I did it. So I know I could definitely do a full. It's just like committing to it and preparing.
Yeah, definitely. It's a much bigger physical commitment on the body, doing the full. I had just moved. So I was in Hawaii. I was training with my ex, who was amazing triathlete. She's like a record holder swimmer at Bucknell. And she was just like, I don't know, it's just her thing. She just is now like crushing Ironmans and everything. And so we were training together, and then we split up, and I got stationed at my next station in Georgia, and I was really butthurt about the divorce. I didn't even want to be married anymore, but she ended up breaking up with me, and then I used it as a whole thing to be like, poor me, look at me, she broke up with me. And even though it's like I knew that we weren't aligned and that's what I wanted anyway. But so when I got to Georgia, I found a training partner there, and I was basically like, oh, I'm going to show her. Like, I'm going to train so hard and I'm going to do so well in this. It was like this whole ego thing. But that's what motivated me to be training. But what I was going to say to you is definitely train. I mean,
Okay.
I was doing 100-mile bikes. I'd go out and do on Saturday, I'd do a 100-mile bike. And then Sunday, I'd run 20 miles. And I do that like every weekend because you just got to get your legs knowing what that feels like.
Yeah. And the one he's asking me to do, maybe you're familiar with, it's Lake Placid up in New York. And I hear there's some elevation in that track that they do in the
Yeah.
bike that runs.
Yeah, I did Louisville, which was a little flat. Lake Placid is going to have some hills. But yeah, as long as you train and that you're focused on having fun, it doesn't matter, Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all the experience of it. You're going to learn things from it. And ultimately, if you're just doing one, the performance is not going to be anything spectacular. But Ironman's is a sport that you got to do over and over and over again. And the best people do it for 20, 30 years. Yeah. But yeah, it was a great experience. I had a lot of fun doing it with Ironman at that time. So my next duty station, I was in Georgia, and I was sent there for school. But I told them, I was like, listen, I'm getting out of the Army after this. Like, you guys are backlogged for school anyway. Don't throw me in a school that I'm not going to use or whatever. You got tons of people trying to get in. So they just had me doing random stuff in Georgia for like 2 years. Like I worked with whatever they call it. I worked with like the highest colonel on the base. And then I was an aide de camp for the 3-star general there. I was just kind of like doing random stuff while I was like in that times in my unhappiness at West Point. This is 2008, and what happened in the 2000s was the poker boom. So now tie those two together, I was super unhappy in the Army, but the one outlet I had was poker. So I used to be at West Point, and I would like formation would end on Saturday at noon, or swim practice would end, and I would get in my car and drive straight 2.5 hours to Atlantic City, and I would play for like 48 hours straight. I just played straight through the night, and then you got to get back to your barracks by, if you're not in your room at 11 p.m. on Sunday night, you get in trouble. So I would play till like 7 p.m. Sundays, like Saturday morning, straight through to Sunday night. And then I'd call my girlfriend, and I'd be like talking to her for 2.5 hours on the way home. I'd be like, talk to me nonstop and don't let me fall asleep. Just total
Incredible.
degenerate. Like, and this is what I've come to learn, is that like when we're really unhappy with like who we are or what we're doing, then like we need these outlets. These would end up being addictive outlets because we're just so unhappy that the thrills that we get from either drugs or sex or poker or stuff on the outside is just this like momentary reprieve from this unhappiness that we feel because we're not in alignment with who we are. And so that's what poker was for me in the beginning. It was an escape. It was a distraction.
2 questions there. Where in your military career, or even before that, did you get introduced to poker, and how did that introduction happen?
I think was probably I like my family's Italian, so we did like card games in the basement with grandma.
Yeah.
And there was an Indian casino, Turning Stone, near Syracuse. So I played there. As soon as I turned 18, I would go in there and play. I used to like play blackjack and stuff like that. So cards was like in my blood. And then 98 Rounders comes on. Then there's the online poker boom. So I was playing I would get out of class at West Point and just go straight and just pop open a browser and play at poker online.
I mean, I was playing on Poker Stars in the mid 2000s as a 13-year-old, learning from my dad. My dad was playing on the sites, and occasionally on a Friday night when I didn't have school, I'd be playing in the 180 person sit and goes. Those are fun. But my other question was David in his late 20s driving to Atlantic City at this time, was he a winning player? Was he a good player?
No, not even close. Because because I told you the part of me that was playing was this like emotionally repressed, thrill-seeking, unaligned, emotional entity. It wasn't even like me playing. It was just this side of me that gets to like let out of the cage, like a dog who's cooped up in the house, and you open the door and they run around the field and everything.
Yeah.
And so I was not a good player because the side of me that was choosing that was not, it wasn't a logical side. I had no I had no background in game theory. I understood like the basic mathematics of poker, but I didn't have an understanding of who I was. So I didn't have an understanding of who the other players were and what they were doing. So I basically am just some basic level of like, I'm waiting for cards. And then, I'd like somebody would like what I'm imagining is like someone opens and then like a 3-bet tens and someone 4 bets. And I'm like, well, I have tens. I got to go all in, something like that is what I was doing. And then I'm like, how does he have kings there? Just I had no, poker's always a reflection. This is part of poker with a purpose. So when we are lost and disconnected from who we are and we don't have a purpose in life, that's who we show up at the table as. And so a lot of my early playing was just like mindless, random emotional decisions and just escapism.
Definitely. We'll touch more on poker with a purpose very soon. What got you from post-military over to where you're at now in Vegas? Was there anything in between, or did you go straight over?
No, so like I said, I was kind of finishing out my time in Georgia. And when I was in Georgia, I was doing the same thing. I was driving down to, I'd go down to Daytona or Jacksonville, and I would just go down there and play all weekend and then come back. And so I was still doing the same thing. And then basically May 31st, 2013, that's the end of my 5-year commitment, 2008 to 2013. And the day that I could get out, I packed up my apartment. I packed up my 97 Dodge Ram. I bought a 5x8 trailer to go behind me. I packed everything in there. My dad flew down from Syracuse. We jumped in the truck and May 31st, 2013, drove straight from Augusta, Georgia to Las Vegas, Nevada.
Incredible. Hi, Vegas.
Well, poker, obviously. And then my dad's parents, my grandma Leona and my grandpa Columbus, they moved out here after they retired, and they were here for maybe like a few years. So when I was younger, my mom and my dad, we would fly out to visit them. So I was like 6, 7, 8, something like that. And I just remember coming to the Strip and we'd stay at Treasure Island. I remember watching the pirate show. We'd go to Caesar's Palace. I just remember being here, and I just remember thinking like, oh my God, this place is amazing. Like, it was like a fantasy world to me, and I just loved it from that really early age. So there was always something in me that was like, man, I got to get back to Vegas. So when I was at West Point and I turned 21, I came out here a bunch of times.
Do you still feel that way now? Do you still love Vegas?
Yeah, I love Vegas. When I first got out here in 2013, it was a little like I felt like I was in the right place, but I still felt a little lost because I personally was still lost. Didn't know who I was and everything. But also Vegas 10 years ago was a lot less culture. There wasn't as much going on. Now it's like you got farmers markets and shows, and you got all this culture that's here now. You got spiritual culture, you got ceremonies, you got all this stuff. So there's a lifestyle here that's more aligned with who I am now. So, and then also I have, my 2 kids and my baby mama who's here. So family here, I got things to do, girlfriend here. So now like my life has become centered around Las Vegas. But when I first got here, I lived here for 2 years, and it wasn't what I thought it was, and I wasn't winning at poker. So I moved to LA for a couple of years to try the games there because I heard the games are better. They got more money. There's more fish. So I went to LA, didn't like LA. And then I came back in 2018. And that's when met a woman. She got pregnant 6 weeks after knowing her. And the rest is history. Now I'm here.
Now you're here. Now you're a father too. 2 boys, right?
Father of 2 boys.
I think you've mentioned to me around that same time you had taken a workshop related to emotional intelligence. Is that correct?
Yeah. You're talking about Choice Center?
Choice Center, yeah. Was it directly correlated with EQ and poker, or just
not
individual?
Yeah, not poker, but it's an emotional intelligence leadership program. Yeah, when I first moved out here in 2013, I was still dealing with a whole bunch of repressed emotions from childhood, rediscovering who I was. I was still lost and disconnected and still trying to find myself. When I showed up here in 2013, I was still playing poker the way that I was playing online back then. So I came out here thinking like, because I would fly to Vegas on the weekends and make money because just a holiday weekend and the players are worse than and everything. So then I got out here and I'm playing 5 days a week and playing against different people and everything. And within 6 months, I went broke. So I was still figuring out who I was, figuring out how to put my life together and everything, and dealing with a whole bunch of repressed emotions and everything. So I remember when I first got out here, I'm taking an anger management course because I was angry. Like I had like a lot of anger and rage, and underneath that, grief, sadness, hurt, a lot of emotions that I didn't even know what I was feeling. And it was just coming out as anger. And it was coming out at the poker table because I'm like, what it was being translated as then was I get a bad result in poker. And it's like, no, but I'm a good poker player. Like I'm out here and obviously I'm good because I've been here before and I've won before and I think I'm good, therefore I'm good. So I had this identity of like, I am a good player. And then the results were not confirming that. And so I was getting very, very upset at the results. And really what it was poker was an outlet for all of my repressed emotions. And I was getting the reflection back of who I was. And so I knew I had like a lot of anger. And so the first thing I did was like, okay, I got to figure this out. So I remember like first thing I did was this anger management course. And then I think I bought some emotional intelligence books and started detangling. I didn't know which direction I was heading, but I was like, all right, I hear you can improve your emotional intelligence and maybe I need to reach out for help. So that was kind of the first phase of it. And then when I was in LA, I did like cognitive behavioral therapy, started doing meditation,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And then when I got back here in 2018, I met my baby mama at Choice Center. And that was like the first emotional intelligence course I took. It's yeah, that's just one of the tools that I had adopted along my way. One of the stops that I made to try to upgrade my consciousness and try to figure out who I was and those sorts of things.
Up to about 2018, were you ever really a spiritual person? Were you ever religious? Was that in your family background growing up?
Yeah, we were Catholic. So, I went to church school. We went to church with the family on Sundays. I didn't really get it. Like I didn't really, like we'd be in church, people singing songs and shaking hands and everything. It just felt very empty to me. Like the church was empty. It was like there's people there like celebrating God and religion, and I didn't get it. Like it didn't connect to me at all. Like I didn't understand what God was. I was like, wait a minute. So there's this like guy in the sky that is watching over you, and like you got to be good. And if you're not good, then you're going to go to hell. And so you got to like work really hard to try to get to heaven. It just it never made sense to me. And so I like would go to church, but I didn't dare like question my parents like, hey mom, did you maybe think there's something else? Like I didn't even think to like ask the questions, or like I didn't even know where else I would go or what else I would do. But that was like my introduction to spirituality. Um, I read in a couple books, like kids should come to God on their own terms through their own curiosity. Like we tend to hand down religion, like we hand down like our beliefs. It's like, this is what I believe, therefore you believe it. Then we don't realize that kids are their own beings. And yeah, they should really come to find God through their own curiosity. And so I was kind of handed down this belief system, which didn't really align with me. And so that was like another aspect of my life that was out of alignment. But I never really got like too like brainwashed by Catholicism because I never really like got attached to it. And then I think I started becoming interested in like Buddhism and stuff like that. That was like I felt more drawn that way. And then I really started getting into spirituality. Like I guess just started reading more books. Like I found my own curiosity through it. Then I started reading like Tibetan Book of the Dead. Started reading like Osho and just people who are spiritual but not religious. And I started like really processing the ideas that they were sharing. And I was like really crafting my own version of what spirituality is or what the spiritual body is and stuff like that.
Yeah, and morality and feeling a little bit more connected. Interesting. So, uh, we're moving through 2018, moving through the Choice Center. Where do you feel like you're starting to find a turning point in who you are and connecting that with who you are as a poker player?
Yeah, Choice Center was a big stepping stone for me because it was the first one where they're not there like telling you who to be. They're there like asking you about you. This was the first thing I realized where they talked about the mirror, the principle of the mirror, which is like everything you see is a reflection of you. And it's the universe, the you inverse. So what you see out there is reflection of you. And so that was the first one. I remember my contract. They give you like contracts after breakthrough, and I am a vulnerable, loving, passionate leader. And that's when I started really understanding like be, do, have. When I was growing up, I was stuck in there's a couple different ways to do it, right? There's do, have, be. If I do all these things, then I'll have money, I'll have a job and whatever, and then I will be happy, be successful. So that's the controller mindset. Controller does it by I do all these things, so that I can have things so that I can be happy. Then there's the victim. The victim does it have, do, be. If I have, and they set themselves up as a victim because they said, I need money, resources, time. I need to have all these things. I need to have success so that I could do things so that I could be happy, smart, successful, have a good relationship. So they set themselves up by realizing like, I don't have this stuff. And so I can't do anything that I need to do in order to be successful. So then this was the first one where I realized like beingness is your foundation. It's like, who do you be? Well, I'm being vulnerable. I'm being passionate. I'm being loving. I'm being a leader. I'm being curious. I'm being connected to myself and connected to others. And so when I am those things and I live in that vibration, then I am matching myself in the universe with the things that I'm aligned with, which is the things that I need to. So my beingness facilitates my doingness. And then when those two are in alignment, then I have the things that I want to have, which is success, money, happy relationship,
Right.
family, all that stuff.
Would you also say that like the outside world then is becoming attracted to who you are being on the inside world? That is truly most aligned and connected with, your soul or this human that you are.
Yeah, the way that our brain works, our pineal gland is like a radio antenna. And so it's constantly sending out signals. Everything that you see in the world is a reflection of what's going on inside us. So when people create radio antennas, it's actually a reflection of what a tool that we actually have within us. This is how the ancients used to do it. And so the pineal gland is a radio antenna, and whatever thoughts, feelings, beliefs that you're broadcasting out is going to attract the same vibration that you're sending out. You can't, if you're broadcasting on one FM channel, you can't pick up another channel. It has to be that specific wavelength. So if you're broadcasting on channel 3, you can only attract channel 3. If you turn to channel 4, you get a different channel, different signal. So yeah, so I started learning that who I am and who I'm being is the most important thing. And what ended up having to happen was I had this vision of who I am or who I'm being, but that vision was getting distorted by all these old emotions, old beliefs, old thought processes, old neurology that had been wired in me throughout my whole life. Through neuroplasticity, you literally have to unlearn all that
Right.
and then rewire your brain to fit the neurology of who you want to be. So between 2018 and now, it's been a whole process of like unlearning all the old behaviors, habits, beliefs, thoughts, feelings, and letting go of old emotions. And so what would happen is I'd go out and I'd be like, okay, I'm loving and joyful. And then I'd go to the poker table and something would happen and I'd like bark at some guy. And then it's like, okay, well, how is that happening if I'm saying I'm loving? And it's like, well, because this belief that I'm not worthy got triggered, and it brought up all the old emotions that are attached to that belief. And then that caused me to behave in the way that I behave in order to express my need in the moment or whatever I've learned to express when that belief gets triggered. So then it became a process of realizing that like, oh, okay, turn the mirror around and I get to see the reflection of who I am, but then ultimately realizing that the beliefs, the thoughts, the feelings are not me. I'm the observer of those things. And now that I can detach and say, it's not that I'm unworthy, it's that I at times have felt unworthy and I've adopted strategies and thoughts and feelings and everything around my unworthiness in order to protect that wound, because that wound is very hurtful, it's vulnerable, it's raw. So I've developed all these behavioral strategies like yelling at people or distracting through poker or whatever in order to cover this up. But then once I got the vision and the objectivity to see things as an experience that I'm having versus this is me, right? This is why they tell you, like, when I'm very mindful of this with my kids, right? Because someone might, you introduce your kid to someone, like someone that you know, but they don't know him. And you're like, oh, this is my son. Or I'd be like, oh, Levi, introduce yourself. And he like hides behind me. And then that person goes, oh, he's shy. And it's like, no, he's not shy. He just doesn't feel like talking to you right now. But when that person says that, what they're doing is creating an identity. So then that
Right.
person, if that happens more and more, then he develops the identity that like, oh, I'm shy. And it's like, no, you're not shy. So we have to be very mindful of realizing that experiences we have as human are just experiences that are meant to come and go. And we have a tendency to attach to those experiences either through repetition or through really intense emotion. That's how the unconscious gets programmed. You do something over and over and over and over again, and your unconscious creates the neurology to keep repeating that pattern. Or if you have a super crazy emotional event, then the emotion from that event gets attached to whatever belief was operating at the time or whatever belief you created afterwards. And that's how your unconscious gets wired. So the process of detangling that is realizing that, like, I'm not my experiences, I'm not my thoughts, feelings, beliefs. And in NLP, one of the presuppositions they use, because I just came back from NLP training, is people are not their behaviors.
What are they?
So people are people. As you said, there's a personality there's a person under the behavior, and people are just using their behaviors as a strategy to get their needs met. This is like people do the best. Another NLP presupposition is people are doing the best they can with what they have. So nobody's perfect, and everybody, the behaviors that they choose in the moment is just a strategy that they've developed over the course of their life to get their needs met. And that strategy is either conscious or unconscious, but if they had different resources or had different upbringing, they would do better, but they're just doing the best they can. So people and their behaviors are two separate things. People use behaviors, and we tend to associate, when we see the behaviors, we tend to attach the behaviors to the person. That person is angry, that person is good or bad or whatever judgment, but they're not their behaviors underneath the actual being that is unlimited. And then we attach all these other things to it, and that person becomes I am.
Rewinding on a lot of things we just discussed there, there's a couple different directions I want to go. For me, I can speak on like the past year alone for me, almost to the day, like September of last year, is where over the course of this last year is the first time in my life I'd ever even considered the word being over the word doing. So, going over those three words in the pyramid of be, have, do. This is the first year for me where like I am seeing things from a different perspective, and I am also experiencing the unraveling of the onion of behaviors and still dealing with the imperfection of like sometimes going back to old patterns. But I'm happy to be on this pathway, rediscovering over and over and growing from it. A year ago, I would say this was the first nudge, the first door that opened. Have you ever read the book Awareness by Anthony DeMello?
No.
I believe he was a Jesuit priest who studied in many different countries around the world and exposed himself to many other different religions other than the one he practiced. But in the book, he spoke a little bit about situations similar to what you described with your son, somebody projecting identity on him. And he was basically saying a lot of these emotions that we experience, all we're simply doing is experiencing them. But there is something in our brain that attaches these emotions to who we are, such as depression, anxiety. And, that book was the first eye opener for me that was saying like, oh, it's part of human nature to feel the entire spectrum of emotions. And it's a part of human nature to experience depression and experience this and anxiety. The moment you say, I have depression, that's sending signals to your subconscious self that this is how you're supposed to feel on a long-term horizon. Whereas in like, oh, if I'm experiencing a bout of shyness, I'm experiencing a bout of depression, I know it's not going to last, but it's like a wavelength. And I'm just able to drift right through it and embrace that wave that I'm on, regardless of how long it lasts.
Yeah, did you know that actually people present with more symptoms after they receive a diagnosis?
I believe that.
So what happens is, for example, if someone has a symptom, right, like they can't focus, they go to the doctor gives them a checklist, and then they say, oh yeah, you have ADHD. Then they go home and they look up the symptoms of ADHD, and they go, oh my God, look at that. I have that, I have that, I have that. So whatever the behavioral adaptation they had in the first place, which was maybe just like, oh, I had trouble focusing because I'm not interested in the subject that I'm supposed to be focusing on, or maybe I just need more breathing, or maybe I need more sleep or something like that. They go, oh, something must be wrong with me. And then they go to the doctor, they get a diagnosis from a professional who knows nothing about their life or nothing about whatever circumstance they were telling him or whatever. And it's not even a doctor, it's a professional diagnoser. That's what he's there to do. He's there to diagnose you and give you medicine. So then you get diagnosed, you create an identity around that, and then you go look up whatever else is attached to that identity. Also, when people are sick, I'm very mindful of this also because my kids might say like, oh, I'm sick. And I make sure to tell them you're not sick, you're healthy. Even when we're experiencing some sort of physical whatever, we're not sick.
Absolutely.
We're
I
healthy,
agree.
and we're healthy because the body is processing what we're going through. And when you say I am sick, you're conditioning there's something wrong with me. And so people, when they are in dis-ease, what happens is once they get the diagnosis, the progression of that disease becomes exponential. Like before diagnosis, people are just whatever. And then once they get diagnosed, the disease progresses much more rapidly because they've attached the identity and they have the doctor's like, oh, this is what you can expect from it or whatever. So you're telling the unconscious like, oh, okay, this is what you're programming the unconscious like, okay, this is what you're supposed to do now.
What do you think is one of the things that you've been most attached to in your life that you came to recognition that you eventually had to detach from? Whether it be something physical in this material world or maybe emotional.
The big thing that's coming up for me right now, and that I've been working on for the greater part of this last year, even longer than that before I was conscious of it, but um, I have had a pattern of using poker to either distract from my feelings of unworthiness or not being lovable or I don't love myself. So what I would do is I would go to play poker to try to feel better about myself. And I happen to be the way that I'm wired. You know, some people just feel worthy all the time. They're just like, I know who I am. I know what I'm up to. I know which direction I'm heading. They're just very sure in who they are and where they're going and all that stuff. I just happen to be one of those people that's not. I can feel like God on one day, and the next day I can feel totally fucking worthless and like completely forget who I am. And some people just are like that. And the gift of that wisdom, because the outflow of struggle is wisdom. And so what I get to learn is like, how do I love myself in the times where I feel completely unworthy? Like, because that's when I need the most. You know, it's really easy to love yourself when like things are going well, when you're winning at poker, when whatever, when you get asked to be on a podcast, when things on the outside go well, it's really easy to love yourself and feel good about yourself. But when things aren't going well, like Viktor Frankl in the Holocaust, right? Man's Search for Meaning, when he's in his camp, in his barracks, and they're feeding him soup and they give out one bowl of soup for the entire thing and everybody's tearing themselves apart just to get this one bowl of soup and he's sitting there realizing like, oh my god, like they've taken our humanity away from us and like I have a choice in all this and I don't have to be turned into an animal even though that's what the outside is forcing me to do. And so we learn that we ultimately have the choice. And so the way that story ends, by the way, is he ends up sitting at the end of his barracks and holding out his bowl of soup for people to take, and it totally transforms the whole barracks. And everybody's like, oh my God, like what have we been doing to each other? And then that whole transformation, the guard sees it, and then the guard starts sneaking them more soup because he's like, what am I doing? What the hell? And then at the end of the war, the people of that barracks helped that guard sneak off into the woods before the Americans came in and took over the camp. And so they all realize that they're all human. There's the only division is what they have created artificially. So yeah, this journey, this process that I've been on is like not using poker as a way to distract from how I feel and like really learning to like love myself every day because the old pattern that I was running was I don't feel good about myself. And when I don't feel good about myself, I look for things on the outside to tell me to feel better.
And it sounds like you were probably attaching a lot of self-worth onto you based on the outcome of your playing and the results of your playing.
Yeah, like I said, when I first got to Vegas, it was like a lot of anger was coming up because it's like, well, I thought that I'm a good poker player and the results were not showing me that. So then I got confronted. Well, my belief about who I am and this identity I created is not matching the results that I'm expecting to get. And so anytime we create an identity for ourselves, on some level, we're setting ourselves up for some type of karmic lesson because identities come and go. And especially nowadays, like in the past, you know, you might be able to live an identity and you know, work your whole life on a career or job or whatever. But we're in the age of Aquarius now. Like this shit is evolving fast. People are shifting fast. People aren't who they were 2 years ago. We're getting downloads and upgrades and we're evolving into new earth and everything is shifting.
Facts.
If you're operating through an identity that is out of alignment with either your mental, emotional, spiritual, or physical body, like you're going to find out quickly. And I've noticed that at the poker table lately. if I'm out of alignment, the results will show me literally within a session or two. Like I literally, if I'm out of alignment, I cannot win at poker.
I want
It
to go
just doesn't.
deeper into that. You just
Yeah.
made a post recently about how you had results over the summer that on the outside don't look so good. You had an $80,000 loss over most of your sessions throughout World Series of Poker in the summer. What's different between that loss and how you view yourself today as a person?
What's
What's
different
that
between,
lesson? Yeah. What's that
yeah,
lesson that you were
what's the
struggling
lesson there?
with over the past few years and this outcome that, on the outside world is pretty unfavorable, but doesn't change who you are?
Yeah, well, I was running a program over the summer, and it's interesting because I'm noticing a pattern with the World Series, right? It's like the World Series is time. That's the time to prove who you are as a poker player. I got to go win bracelets. You got all these people coming in from out of town. Like I better be playing my best game. I better be on my toes. And so that's actually the time where my underlying beliefs get triggered the most. And it's just like it happened the last 2 years, like clockwork. Because I'm just like, okay, it's time to grind. I'm gonna play tournament every day. I meditate to do all this, but it's too much doing this. And what happens is the belief that gets triggered is I'm not good enough because I'm telling myself that like I need these results over the summer to validate who I am. I need to win bracelets. Like I better win bracelets. I moved here to Vegas to play poker. And so like I better perform. And it just like when you're sitting in that vibration and as much work as I do, it doesn't matter how much work you do. Everybody can only see to their ability in the moment, So I do my own work and I have friends that point stuff out to me and whatever, but I'm constantly realizing the layers which these beliefs go down. And so as I peel off more layers, I'm like, okay, I figured it out. I got it. I solved it. And then even though there's no solving it, but then I'm like, oh shit, there's I didn't realize it went that deep, or I didn't realize it went that deep. And it just is, so the whole thing is just looking at the results and realizing that it's a reflection. And I'm like, okay, well, how did I create these results? Like, how did I show up for the World Series thinking I was going to have these amazing results? And this is what I got. What was happening under the surface that was having me be out of alignment? What got in the way?
What got in the way?
I knew you were going to ask that. Great question. Yeah, what got in the way was
If you'd be so kind.
my feeling unworthy, my feeling unloved, my feeling like I don't have enough. Like anytime in poker or anything, like anytime we say I don't have enough, it's a reflection of the belief I am not enough. What I've really been noticing lately, I don't think that I was put on this earth to like be a great, amazing poker player in the same way that I wasn't put on this earth to be at the top of my class in high school or be a Division I athlete at Duke or Notre Dame or whatever. That's like an idea I had in my head of who I wanted to be, because if I'm that, then I'm worthy, then I'm lovable, then I'm all these things, right?
Yeah.
And so I may win a tournament, I may win the main event, I may have amazing results at the poker table, but ultimately that's going to come when I fully believe that I am enough within. And so, yeah, what happened over the summer was I got stuck in the doing this, and I got stuck in the one track mind of this is where my energy's going to play poker and to be good at poker. And I forgot about all the things I'm actually good at, like being in service, supporting people, bringing out the best in people, running poker with a purpose, and using my experiences at the table as a way to awaken the collective consciousness by being my vulnerable, authentic, raw self. Like those are the things that bring me in trains, and those are things that they're inherent value that I have to share with this world. And when I just go to play and say, okay, I'm playing now to get results, I say, I don't give a shit about all this stuff. I'm going to play and get results. And then I feel not valuable when the results don't come because I'm forgetting about all this stuff. I'm just ignoring who I am.
So, Dave, what would you define as your purpose of playing poker? Not your purpose of life, but your purpose to play poker.
Well, the purpose to play poker is whatever purpose you assign to it, right? I know you're asking about me specifically, but
Yeah.
in general, right, things have no inherent meaning or inherent value. It's only the value that we project or the meaning that we project onto them, right? So for anyone playing poker or anyone doing anything, you are assigning the value to that thing. And so for me, as we've kind of discussed both ends of the spectrum, right, sometimes my purpose is to go prove that I'm unworthy. Sometimes it's to go prove that I'm worthy. Sometimes it's just to go have fun and enjoy myself. Other times it's like, all right, I'm here to receive whatever lessons the universe wants me to receive, and I'm open to receiving those messages. Other times it's to connect with the other players, to just be my joyful, grateful, loving self and to connect with people and let the results be what they may. Like to completely let go of the results and the
Yeah.
expectations of outcome. And so I have this sort of spectrum of ways that I show up at the table. And my task is to be aware of what state I'm in before I go play. I get to ask myself, like, who's playing? Who's wanting to go play? And what does he want? What does he need? What's he feeling? Because without that awareness, I'm going to still show up and start jamming pocket tens on some random four bet because I feel like emotionally unfulfilled and empty.
Feel very unconnected with whoever you're playing with.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a whole experience during the summer where I couldn't read the players. Like I study behavior. I am the number one behavioral analyst. Like I can connect to players on a level that is not being done out there anywhere in the poker world right now. And I'd be sitting at the table and I'd just have like a blank screen. I'm like, I don't know what I'm seeing. I don't know if he's strong or weak. I'd be like getting in there when they're strong and then I'd be folding when they're weak. And I just had my wires all crossed. And that's because I was disconnected from who I am. And so it doesn't matter how much studying you do, whatever state you're in, you can be one of these pros that studies GTO all the time. But if you're in the moment and you're feeling something that you're not aware of in the moment, then your emotions will choose. We think that people play logically and they don't, they play emotionally. So the emotion will choose the thing to get you to realize what you're feeling with it. And so, yeah, that's I get to be aware of who's playing and what he wants, what he's
It
feeling.
makes me think about all my experiences playing poker. I mean, I probably had different sub personalities playing at different times. There was times for me where I was playing because I did enjoy the social environment. I did enjoy connecting with others. I did enjoy the intellectual simulation of, a game and breaking down decision makings. And then there was other parts of me that was playing for economic outcome, positive economic outcome. And I don't think I was really present with which personality was or which mask was sitting down to play at those times. And even just 2 days ago on one of your poker with purpose calls, I was telling you I think I became pretty robotic during a lot of the volume I was putting in a couple of years ago before I slowed down and really started to analyze what was going on. Still doing that. But.
Yeah. Well, that's great awareness that you realize that there's different parts of you that show up at different times to play. And, the next step is just, the old way of doing it. I mean, it's not old way, but, they went to the way they did it in mental game of poker was write down your A, B, C, D game. And it's just realizing that the A, B, C, D game is just the different sides of you that show up for different reasons. And they each have different needs and they show up in different ways. And they like, for me, for example, I have two distinct sides. One is I call Mike Tyson. And this is like greatest fighter of all time, right? But when he was fighting, very fearful underneath, everything was fear-based. And so this is like the hot tilt. Like, I'm going to fight my way through this game. I'm here to battle. I'm here to beat up on everyone. And ultimately, I'm here to basically light my bankroll on fire because I am in a deep state of fear that I'm not aware of. And I'm basically then everything at the table is a projection of what's going on within, which is like everybody is triggering my fight impulse underneath because I in survival and in fear and I feel like I'm on defense. And I have another guy that plays that I forget what I called him, but he's the other side. He's the cold tilt side. He's the I don't have enough. I am not enough. And like I better not make a mistake. I better not lose a dime. Better play perfect. Because if I mess up or anything, then what will that say about me as a person? And so everything is like, I better mind my P's and Q's and play perfectly. And so what happens is you're not playing free and you basically are going to melt your stack away cold tilt style.
So how does all of this turn into something like Poker with Purpose? I know you're not alone in that operation. Tell me about you and your partner and how this started.
Great question.
The Making Insight is brought to you by our unofficial sponsor, Poker with Purpose.
So how did Poker with a Purpose come to be? So my partner Sasha, he and I met when I first moved to Vegas in 2013. What happened was I was working real estate at the time and he needed a place to stay for the summer. And I spent like 10 hours trying to find him a long-term rental. And he was just very moved by the fact that I had worked so hard to find him a place to stay. And like the commission for it, you get like $100 or something. So I spent like 10 hours or something trying to find him a place, which is kind of hard to do because it was last minute. And he was just very moved by that. But at the time, I was like, I told you I was angry. I didn't know who I was and all that stuff. So all my poker friends were like, Dave's an asshole. Sasha was like, well, but he did that really nice thing for me. He didn't have to do that. So obviously he's not like an asshole. But so then our journey became like, he was really the first person to see, besides like my parents, he was the first person to really see me beneath or behind the mask that I was wearing. And so, yeah, we developed a friendship. He started teaching me how to play because he's from Ukraine, chess background, very smart, logical, detailed thought process. And so we started working together. He started teaching me how to play better. And we started we didn't know it at the time, but we started the process of detangling all this stuff. He went to Choice Center with me. He went to class like right before me, but he was like the first one that was like, one, seeing me for who I was underneath the mask, and two, giving me like really honest feedback about the way I was showing up, which is something that people don't do, right? People
Right.
like label you, right? Oh, you're an asshole or you're mean or whatever. But people can only meet you to the level they understand or are aware of themselves. So I had a confidant in Sasha where he was giving me feedback about the way that I'm showing up and was really encouraging me to show up in a different way, in a way that's more aligned for me. And so, yeah, we did all the emotional intelligence stuff together, Choice Center. When I originally created Poker with a Purpose in maybe like 2000, like eight, this might have been like right out like mid 2018 after Choice Center. It was very image based. It was like, oh, look at me, look how smart I am, look at these, like all these chips I got. And it was kind of like that. And then we tweaked it to like, Sasha was honest with me and told me, he's like, that's what you're doing. And I kind of didn't realize it, or I didn't want to acknowledge that. And then it just, Sasha let me know that your power is your vulnerability, your authenticity, your rawness, your vision, being able to see deep below the surface. So I created Poker with a Purpose as a reflection of myself, which at the beginning was this whole image conversation, I'm so good, which is one of the personalities that talks through me, one of the old beliefs that has its own behaviors. And then he was really reminding me like, your power is your authenticity, your vulnerability. And so, yeah, I really switched over to like, okay, like, what is this poker experience bringing up in me? What belief is getting triggered? What feelings am I feeling? What emotions are present? And what am I learning from this? And it just became like this reflection of like who I am, which is this like deep emotionally feeling, caring, thoughtful, like kind, always looking out, always trying to do my best and always looking out for others to do their best, empowering other people, all those things. And so that I was like, how can I bring this out in the entity that is Poker with a Purpose? And then, now it's evolved to where we are basically NLP is what we do now, neuro linguistics programming. And we help people discover who they truly are. And so we have all these great NLP techniques that we use they're able to basically wipe your slate clean, can remove the only way it works is if people want to, because obviously there's payoffs in people doing the same things over and over again. So when people want to shift,
Go ahead.
they shift, and we support them in that with these NLP techniques that all basically wipe your limiting beliefs clean. They can clear out old emotion. They can integrate parts of yourself, right? Oh, I have this part that's saying this, and I have this part that's saying this. And you can bring those two together because ultimately they want the same thing. And so, yeah, we have all these techniques and we get clients from all over the world that come to us and are like, yeah, these people teach me. I had a coach before and they teach me what to do in this situation at the table, how often to 3-bet, how often to 4-bet, and it's not helping. I study all the time. I study super hard and my results are not reflecting the amount that I study. And it's like, well, because you're out of alignment with who you are as a person and you have different beliefs, emotions, thoughts, feelings that are operating at different times that are getting in a way, not only playing your best, but also enjoying the game of poker. And so we serve people in that way by getting back to who they truly are, getting in touch with their own inner wisdom, their intuition, getting back to enjoying the game of poker, which most people start out like really enjoying it. And then you pile all this baggage onto you, all this studying you have to do, all this garbage of like, I'm on a downswing, like all these bad results that you are
Playing
carrying
becomes a
around with you.
migraine. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you forget who you are, and without the purpose and intention, and without the awareness and consciousness of like, who am I, how am I showing up, and ultimately I'm here to love myself first and foremost, so that poker can't take it away from me. Without all that, poker will just put you through the grinder and spit you out on the other side.
So essentially, poker is just that underlying connection between you and helping others find out who they truly are. It really has not much to do with poker. Poker is just that inner community that is almost attracting you and others to one another.
Yeah, it's a very unique creation.
Yeah.
It's I've finally discovered who I am deep down, and I'm an Aquarius, so I love being the rebel, creating new things, being innovative. And I'm like, well, what can I do? Combine my like 3 favorite things, right? Poker, emotional intelligence, and writing. I love to write and think and dive deep and see things in the way that other people don't see them and speak my truth. And so I'm like, how can I combine those things? And that's poker with a purpose.
Yeah. I mean, you're an incredible communicator in words, and that's what kind of attracted me to your post probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. And obviously I saw you were playing poker, but it was more so the messages that you were leaving in your content that you're producing that had a lot more to do with what you're experiencing emotionally, mentally, and inside yourself. That I just, I was experiencing that in myself in other areas of life, just didn't really recognize it coming out the poker table.
Yeah, thank you. That's really my goal, right? Is most poker coaching is based on results. Look how good I am at poker, and then let me teach you to be like me, right? So people look at like, okay, this guy has great results. And so if he has great results, he can teach me how to have great results. But ultimately, it's that person is teaching you how to be the best version of themselves. And a lot of times they don't even know what they're doing. Like they have some concoction of emotions, beliefs, and habits and whatever that works for them, but you can't teach other people to be like you. It doesn't work. So ours, we're really like, when I speak my truth, the clients we get, as you said, is clients that something I say or something I do or whatever is connecting to something within them that is been there all along, that is yearning to be awakened. And I'm just the conduit. Just by me being myself, I attract those who are looking for that same vibration.
Yeah, looking to become closer to themselves. Do you believe you could define your life's purpose?
Do I believe I can define my life's purpose?
Yeah. Do you believe you know it? You believe it? You have it figured out?
Well, anytime we have it figured out, life has a funny way of throwing a monkey wrench in it. So I try to avoid feeling like I have things figured out. But in general, I get up every day. I sit down, I meditate, I do my hop in the morning, and I set my intention for the day. And sometimes it's like, all right, today I'm just going to love myself as best I can. Or sometimes it's, hey, universe, allow me to be in service today. Let me help out where is needed. Send me an opportunity to like show my value. Every day is a brand new day, and every day is a blank canvas. And so my purpose shifts. Ultimately, my purpose is to, be curious, to learn, to grow, to have fun, to play, to be creative, to inspire myself and others. Just really enjoy and be grateful for the gift of life, which I'm not even going to say what I was going to say, but really just be grateful for the gift of being alive. There's like I think there's a rawness that exists, like the rawness of existence that and a lot of times, I don't want to speak for others, but a lot of times that I ignore or dismiss, or I get so focused on having good poker results or doing the best I can or getting good grades or proving myself or whatever. And it's like, man, we're fucking alive. Like shit is happening all around us. Life is here.
We are alive with all of the nature around us. We are the same existence of that. It's mind-boggling. Yeah, that we get up and go into cars and just live this life that's so unfathomable.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the purpose shifts, it moves. Life, we can have our own idea of what our purpose is, but I could be walking down the street and see a car accident. And in that moment, my purpose is to be in service and help someone get out of a burning car. I could be walking down the street and then just helping some old lady cross the street. That's my purpose in the moment. Yeah. The purpose is whatever you choose to be the purpose, and life asks different things from us at different times. And I'm just happy to be open to whatever the universe is asking of me, because when we flow with that, that's how we find our true value.
Beautiful.
See, like my purpose right now is to be on your podcast.
That is exactly why I brought you onto the podcast, to share that wisdom. Teaches me a lot. My whole purpose to have a podcast is to continue to grow and become a better communicator and become a better listener. Ultimately, I think that's on the most important side of being a communicator, being a better listener.
What is what's the number one thing that you heard today that you're taking away?
So what comes to mind is I kept thinking a lot about how you were talking about you didn't know who you were while playing poker, during the 2010s. Being on this podcast today truly excites me. And I don't think I really knew who I was when I was podcasting 4 years ago. I found that excitement, but it was more so of me doing it and then me looking at what other podcasters were doing. And eventually it just fizzled out because I'm like, I'm not getting the type of results that these other podcasters are. There could be some other underlying things, but at the end of the day, like what I want right now is to be somebody who has deep intellectual conversations like these with people who I feel inspired by, people who I think are doing creative things that, I don't have to be doing them, but I find them fun. So I heard that in myself earlier, but I also hear a human being who came out of this podcast willing to be vulnerable. I do think there are probably like people in the poker community who would maybe listen to this and actually feel pretty disconnected to the ideas around showing up to the poker table that you and I may share. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that for me is getting a little bit out of my comfort zone, being able to be disconnected with people, not purposefully, but it's just like, I guess in today's world, you'd call it disliked or hated, but
Yeah. So I'm hearing that you
now it
learned,
gets good. Now it gets good. Lay it on me, Dave.
I'm hearing that you learned that when you're focused on what other people are doing, or when you're doing things with the intention of having good results, ultimately it's out of alignment for you. And so what you learned this time around was that the most important thing is being yourself and allowing your own creativity and wisdom and excitement lead the way. And now you feel more inspired, more excited, more aligned than you did 4 years ago.
Absolutely.
And ultimately by allowing those parts of you, your curiosity, your excitement, your joy, your inspiration to lead you, gives you a better sense of who you are because you're actually listening to yourself instead of listening to what's on the outside.
100%. And I think that's true abundance. The moment I get attached to any outcomes, even if those outcomes happen, I believe that is a lack of abundance, or that is a state of lack of abundance, because I'm attached to those specific outcomes and when I should just be who I'm meant to be and let the outcomes be a result of who I'm being. Sounds so simple, right?
Well said. It is simple. Beautiful.
This was fantastic. I'll share gratitude on my end. I'm grateful for you to be here. I cannot wait until the next time I am in Vegas and I get to hear you strum the guitars behind you, play me a little bit of Stolen Time, and reconnect maybe through a ceremony or just quality time.
Beautiful. Can't wait. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I really enjoyed our conversation. Great questions. Yeah, you're natural at this. Your curiosity and your excitement and everything is very natural, organic. So this was a pleasure.
I'm blessed. And I said this with Obsidian. There are probably much lengthier conversations that we could have had on all of the topics we covered. So I would love to do this again, hopefully in person one day. Maybe I can have both you and Obsidian on. We can be in that room right behind you.
Yeah.
All talking about all these interesting concepts. But for the time being, we're doing what's meant to be done.
Can't wait for the next time.